Hey guys, it's Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, and today I have with me Richard Knaak. He's a prolific author. I've been following him for years, his early works, and he's written in so many things in the early D&D days. So you guys will probably recognize his works. We have Micah and we have Phil in the house as well, and you three are all kind of like teaming up to take Richard's latest project and bring it into the RPG world. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. Thanks for having us here. It's actually good. It's actually good to see. I'm always communicating with Micah and Phil through Messenger and stuff. So it's actually good to see them face to face. Although I'm not giving my face. I'm the living black hole today. So
I like the fact you're keeping the air of mystery going, yes. Richard.
I'm a mystery man. Yes. But thanks for having us.
It could be Richard. It could be a vampire. No one will ever know.
I'm still not convinced he's real. I mean, it's only written.
I'm computer generated.
He actually is shade.
There you go. Yeah. Yes, my face is nothing but a blur when you see it.
So I guess let's talk about your latest project, because that's the one that's going to become an RPG product. Rex Draconis. So what is that? What is the elevator pitch there?
Rex Draconis, for years I've had people compliment me on my previous work, especially the Dragonlance stuff I did. I'm very well known for the Legend of Huma and Kaz the Minotaur. I developed the Minotaurs of Dragonlance into an entire massive civilization, and people have always said they miss. First of all, they miss Dragonlance, obviously. But second of all, I've got some people said they really love what I did with those characters. There's so many Kazes being played in games. Or like relatives of Kaz, and there's some Huma type characters out there, and I belong to some of the Facebook groups like Dragonlance Adventures and Dragonlance Legacy, and I keep hearing this from people. I get emails from people, and I finally started thinking about how close I could come to working with Dragonlance and not be there. And I've always loved Minotaurs, as people know, and especially Phil would probably know from his own work, and I finally started putting down some notes, and after some encouragement from some readers, started creating a world, Tiberos, which is the world of Rex Draconis. That's the setting name, and we have a Minotaur empire of sorts. We have knights. We have many things that will be reminiscent of the sort of things people loved about Dragonlance, but that I can use in another setting, and I've adapted them to my own ideas. So not only are you getting something that you should be comfortable with from Dragonlance, but it's going to introduce you to a bunch of new things, new characters, new races, new conflicts, and like I said, just start all to flow. Once people, and I told people on Dragonlance Adventures especially about it. They all encouraged it. We started on the first story, which I called Under the Dragon Moon, because that's an important incident in my world. And originally was supposed to be one story to get things flowing, and then it became agreeing to do two novellas. And then after that, things started flowing so well that people wanted to they kept insisting, no, we want to get more of a novel. And I said, okay, fine. After the two novellas, if people are appreciative, then I'm going to do a novel. And then shortly after, I said, oh yeah, I'm just doing a novel, period. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll be doing a trilogy after those two novellas. I just started because just people keep coming in and going. They say, oh, I love your Dragonlance work in Kaz. I'm like, oh, you're doing this now? Oh, great, I want to see this now. And it's basically, if you love Dragonlance, if you love my work in Dragonlance, or even actually in the Dragonrealm or in other fantasy worlds, here's what I've been doing all these years, and the culmination of it in some ways. Here's what I've always wanted to do with the Minotaurs, the knights, and the dragons and magic. If you love Dragonlance, you should enjoy this. I can't promise to please everybody, but I'm hoping to please a lot of people.
When my friends and we read Chronicles, they went in one direction, like the Tale of the Twins, that area, and I went towards like Huma and Kaz and the Minotaur stuff. I feel like, and I believe I've read all of the Dragonlance stuff you've written for, especially if it had anything to do with Minotaurs. But again, it's going back to my teen years, so it's like 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago.
Thanks. I feel really old now. I appreciate that.
I know. Well, I was kind of thinking that. I was thinking, like, I read this stuff when I was in my mid to late teens, and that was a while ago. I wasn't going to bring it up, though.
I sold my first short story to Dragonlance a year and a half out of college. So fortunately, I was still in my mid 20s at that time. So when I wrote, I'll age myself now. When Legend of Huma came out, I was just about to turn 27. So you can take it from there basically. So, but it was it was great. I mean, I wrote a story that involved my first story was about dragons and draconians, and then I wrote about a second story. I wrote about a knight who willingly sacrificed himself to stop an army, and then I wrote another story where I had a knight who meets a minotaur because I read about their honor systems, and I wanted to contrast them. One would go to that the other would not go to. And so actually, and that story actually switched into the second book. It was supposed to be the third one. And so when you see that one with the Minotaur and the Knight, that's the precursor to Huma, Legend of Huma. And after those two stories, that's when they contacted me and said, we like the way you handle honorable characters like the Knights of Solamnia and how we've mentioned, even though they're supposed to be evil, yeah, right, how the Minotaurs also have a sense of honor. And so when you do a novel based on the original wielder of the Dragonlance, Huma, Dragonbane. And I took about 10 seconds to think about it, and sure. And that's how everything flowed from there.
Did you find that intimidating at all? Because he's supposed to be like this legendary character in the Dragonlance setting.
I was a little bit intimidating. One thing was that the material that I was given was contradictory to itself at times. So based on one timeline I had, he lived 300 years before the Knights of Solamnia, which, you hear about people ahead of their time, but that was a little ridiculous. And then another one put him in the wrong dragon war. So I tried. That's why there's a prologue at the beginning where I tried to organize things a little bit better. And then I tried to base everything on what the material they gave me. With Huma, there wasn't a lot of personal material on him, so I was able to flesh things out toward what I thought made sense with him. I didn't want him to be I am Johann Godslayer. I wanted him to be a real human character, which is the way I take from his name. I always pronounce it Huma. Some people Huma. I pronounce it Huma as in terms of human, and that's what I think. That's where I think the name came from. So. And he turned to, and then of course I had to bring the Minotaur in right away because I wanted somebody to contrast him, but at the same time be similar to him, and that made the story flow better. I went through about three story ideas. First one would try to work off too much of the original chronicles, and when we TSR and I both agreed that was the wrong direction to go. Second one. The second one was closer to what this story was, but I tried to do a little bit of a different tone to it, and we decided it was getting closer. And then the third one, they were like, "Yeah, go this way," and you can see it turned out nice. Most people seem to enjoy it. I got fans all over the world still talking about it. I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah, one of our chat moderators is currently running a Dragonlance game, and he was talking about because they're streaming it. And so you mentioned that you like playing in other people's sandboxes, essentially working with other things and putting your spin on it.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of doing Rex Draconis, kind of trying to recapture some of that Dragonlance feel. So what areas do you feel like, are the nostalgia points for Dragonlance that you want to bring forward? And then some of the things that you feel like you want to, where areas where you want to make it your own.
Well, some of the things that I found, these are some of the things that I believe in too. I always like that heroic, that honorable, heroic sense of Dragonlance. There's not. I mean, yeah, there's some shades of gray, but you still have heroes in there. They're not perfect, but they're still people. They're still characters trying to do the right thing, and with these days we have so much moral ambiguity on our stories. I want, I always like to have heroes. I want to bring that part of, especially of Dragonlance back, and that bigger than life fantasy element still too, though. I worked with Warcraft and Diablo, so I'm used to working bigger than life worlds, obviously. But Dragonlance was the original one to me, and that's mostly what I want to bring back from Dragonlance. That feel that you got when you read their stories, like, whoomp, here it is, and then some of the things I developed from that world that people seem to really enjoy, the sense of honor of the Minotaurs. I turned them into a complex race, I think, especially with the Minotaur Wars, but that all pulls from the original stuff that I got out of Dragonlance itself. That they're characters with shades of gray to them, but they're good characters and they're bad characters. We have heroes, we have villains, we have the epic and epic fantasy. Just all those things together, and then take my own spin on it, like things that I would have wanted to do with Dragonlance that I couldn't because it was a more specific setting. I couldn't add certain types of characters or races. I couldn't do certain things with the Minotaurs or Knights that I might have wanted to do. I mean, it would have made sense, but there were certain things that they had guidelines of that I couldn't quite do. So you're going to notice the characters will be very much to the vein of Dragonlance.
Now, the three of you are now going to work together to bring this project to tabletop, and this is the first novella is out. You got another one planned and a trilogy. So it sounds like it's still pretty fresh and new.
Oh yeah. This actually originated, I think, late. I mean, not late. I mean, very early last year. I think is when I first really put things together, and I really didn't. I think it was in the spring when I really started going very serious on it. And I originally wanted to do a novella because I didn't have time in my schedule to do a full-length novel, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go over with people since it wasn't with any publisher or anything. It was just all strictly my own thing, and so I wanted to at least try to get something out, and I didn't want it too long because I started discussing with people with various readers, and they wanted to see it, and I didn't want them to wait forever for something. So that's why I tried to work on, and yet the novella ended up going to like 40,000 words, which is basically a small novel. It fits in the criteria for a novel if you look at a lot of things. But it just flowed. It flowed very nicely. Characters came in very nicely, to my opinion anyway. I mean, other people might say it differently. I don't know. I thought of a couple of different races to put in. I know that the guys like the Quillam, for instance.
Love the Quillam.
Well, even like that was probably one of the things I really enjoyed about Dragonrealms was the different races. You had the Seekers and the Quell.
Yeah, you remember? Yeah, and which course? Oh, yeah, the Seekers. Oh, by the way, in the new book, I've introduced a sub branch of the Seekers. They're more of an owl-looking group. This one, they come from the north. So even amongst the different races, there's different types. So, but I enjoy creating things like that. I've created some new races in the Dragonrealm. Besides that, too, I've got the Jaru, who are another underground race that first show up in the Turning War trilogy, and now in this world in Rex Draconis, I've got the Quillam, which, if you want to say, they're the closest thing we have to maybe Kender, although they're not quite the same. But they can be really annoying that way, though. The Quillam. Let's put it this way: they have a. You don't want to grab one quickly, because their hair, they're very much like porcupines in some way, and those needles are damn hard and sharp on there, and they look like basically hair on them until they have to react. So,
yeah, the Quillam are actually the first race that we've actually written for the Rex Draconis setting. We've got a bit of a spiel up on the Facebook page for those already. So we're already making headway into those sorts of characters as well.
So Phil and Micah, what are you guys most excited about on this project? I mean, other than working with Richard, like I personally, I would be blown away because, like I said, I spent so much time with your works, in my teen years and early 20s.
For me, I'm a huge Dragonlance fan from way back, and a huge Richard a Knaak fan from way back as well. Legend of Huma was one of my favorite books when I was growing up. And I think it's just that nostalgic feel and being able to give to a world that's something that I loved and something that I grew up with. And yeah,
like I couldn't agree more. I was one of those young teenage gamers that very quickly made a Minotaur character as one of my early RPG characters, based solely on how Richard portrayed the Minotaurs. Previous to that, they were D&D monsters. They were, based out of the legends of being, brutish and dwelling in mazes and eating foolish adventurers. But Richard really sort of brought them to life. And I was hooked pretty much from then on in. The thing for us, Phil and I feel very lucky that we've managed to develop a professional relationship with Richard, because it is very much for us going back to our early roots, and the opportunity to expand and work on a Dragonlance like world that has a lot of the elements that we get really nostalgic for, that we think a lot of the current fantasy settings don't really have. It's an amazing opportunity, and we just can't get into it fast enough, basically.
So
yeah, I'm looking forward to what they do. I knew of Phil's work first. As you said, he's got a Minotaur trilogy of games, of adventures, and I was very impressed by what I saw. And then he introduced me to Micah, and who's got some really fascinating stuff too. And I've had people ask me to do work on stuff in the past, and I've always been kind of afraid to do that. I have a lot of fans who have interest in making gaming stuff, but I wanted people who actually knew what they were doing when they did the gaming stuff. And I was glad to hook up with these two guys, because right away I could see they had the professionalism and the drive that I was looking for.
sounds like a marriage made in heaven. It's and it's cool, because I'm excited to see your see this stuff come to life. And you had even talked, before we went live, we were talking about some other things I won't mention. I'll leave that off now until, in case that solidifies later on. But that would make me really excited.
Oh, speaking of one of those things you're talking about, I got a signal that yes, there will be audiobooks.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. No scheduled time yet, but there will be as soon as possible.
Yeah, Audible gets a lot of my money nowadays, so.
Me too.
I think it's the same for a lot of us.
Yeah. It's just so damn convenient.
It's horrible. Only one of the Dragonrealm novels is on audio right now. It's I don't have the rights to most of them, but only the first book in the Turning War is on audio.
Okay, so
Maybe start petitioning the publishers then.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. And like I was saying before we went live, like a lot of your stuff in, especially my earlier D&D campaigns, it made it in there. I definitely used the Quell and Seekers, and I loved your take on the dragons from the Dragon Realms, how they all had a humanoid form that they would assume. Totally ripped that off from you.
I've influenced a few different settings that way too. I mean, there weren't much. Warcraft had something going on like that, but I really pressed that point with my first stories, and it seems like that I got more into that after I pressed on it. There's some fun stuff I do with that. Also, with the new setting, you've got something different. You've got the Fafnir and the Afafni, which are two. I'll call them dragon folk races, because they're not. You wouldn't technically call them dragons, but they come really damn close, because they have two forms. These kind of scaly-looking elf characters. One is like that during the day and becomes dragon at night. One is dragon during the day and becomes the elf form at night, and they hate each other because
yin and yang.
And you're both and they have this common origin, which is hinted at in the first story. and their conflict is what is part of the whole Dragon Moon sequence. But the next story is technically titled Lords of the Dragon Moon, where we're going to meet a bunch of more Fafnir and Afafni, and they're nasty. And then we're going to also introduce some other possible conflict things going on. For instance, I mentioned these things called Lich Hounds to the guys, and they also have a purpose. They're just going to cross paths with the Afafni and the Afafni. So, and meanwhile, there's the Were, which are our canine nasty race, which is they breed like rabbits as opposed to dogs, but otherwise they're canine. And they're starting to swarm down from the north. So we got some different conflicts that are starting to come into this world, with some common elements that will tie them together eventually.
So in the series, in the novellas, and the trilogy, are you going with like is it the same main character, or is it going to jump around?
You're going to find some characters who are going to be relevant to the first, I'd say, stories and trilogies worth of books. We have Eric Constantine, who's a knight. He's going to be rising. He's a young guy, kind of human-ish. We're going to be seeing him rising up in the hierarchy through things that happen because of him. We've got Wrath, the Minotaur captain, whose ship is part of the problem at the beginning of this thing, and through no fault of their own, they're going to end up having to deal with things together on a few things. And then I've got some other characters, to use some generic terms on them. Well, there's the Quillum. I've got an elf or two that's going to be popping in here. Rather than name all the characters, but the two that are most important right now would be Wrath the Minotaur and Eric Constantine, because they're going to find themselves thrown in through no fault of their own into all these situations. So then they will be significant, and they will be significant at least through the trilogy, and probably more so, because if I like a character and I can think of a good reason that they should be around, they will be around. I don't throw characters in just for the heck of them being there, but if they got some significant reason, they'll show up. Even if they don't always show up in every story, if I think that they need to be coming back, they will. If you've read my Dragonrealm stuff, you know some of my books pop around to different characters from the series. For instance, Wolfhelm is all basically the Griffin. Shadowsteed is mostly Dark Horse and Shade. So I don't always stick with one main character, but you usually recognize somebody in the story. So you have somebody to go, oh, it's him again. Great. That sort of thing.
I actually enjoy that a lot. I actually get a little disappointed with writers sometimes when it is only like one main character, and it's like I guess like Jim Butcher's Dresden Files is a good example where he's made this amazing world, great character, but I'm like, oh, it's so much like to hear about some of these other characters.
Well, see, I've actually got an urban fantasy series now called the Black City Saints series, which takes place in Prohibition Chicago, and the main character used to be St. George. And the dragon still remains with him in a sense. You have to, but I've started to create. I'm starting to have other characters around him, and he'll probably be the main character. But each time, I focus on certain other characters in each story. For instance, you learn about in addition to learning about his reincarnated love, who keeps getting killed by nefarious means. You also have this shapeshifter who can't shapeshift in the real world, so he's stuck he looks like a big dog, wolfhound sort of thing. And he has this fondness. He loves human slang, so he talks very strangely sometimes. But you learn that even though a character may look like he's simple, there's some story will come along that will show you that there's a lot of layers to each of them. So the main character will be there because he has to be because of the main conflict. But I'll give you through his eyes, I'll give you more depth on each of the other characters. And I'm introducing some more in each book. So I'll always come back and I'll say, oh, here's a character you saw in the second book. He's now in the fourth book, the one in the third one right now. But I mean, that's how I'm hoping it'll go. Always bring somebody back when necessary. I even have this creature, this shadow creature called Lon, because the character's first thought when he looked at him was he looked like Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera. So he's nicknamed him Lon, which irritates the thing to no hell, but it can't attack him because it's not permitted to attack him. So every time you irritate, you'll call it Lon.
It sounds like you just have a brutal writing schedule. You're talking about Rex Draconis, Dragon Realms, your urban fantasy series. That's a lot on one plate.
These are my children in a sense. I like telling stories, basically, even though I do things for other people, I've got a couple. I can't tell what they are, but I've got a couple of other things coming out from different series and stuff there. But right now, Rex Draconis and Black City Saint and Dragonrealm are my I hop here and go here and go here. Basically those worlds. And I've got a list of other things. Sometimes some things will take a seat back. I had to pause on the Dragonrealm just because I needed to get the other stuff out from my mind a little bit. But I've got to finish up the first novel in that trilogy, and then that'll happen after I do some more Rex Draconis stuff. So, yes, these are my children. As I said, they envelop my life.
I totally understand that. So, how many books do you try and get out a year?
I like to. I don't know about books per se, but I like to get out at least, hopefully, a minimum of 2 things a year.
Okay.
If I can get more than 2 things out a year, that's even better. This year, let's see, the Lexi Saint book is coming out at the end of the year. I'm well into that one. I want to definitely get the second. Obviously, the second novella is imminent too, and then I'll be working on. I'll come to think of it, and one of the other projects that I'm doing for something else will be out soon too. So that's at this point I'll probably have like 5 things at least come out this year. Some of them were done before, but some of them a lot of them are being worked on different stages now. A lot of Rex Draconis, Black City Saint, 3rd book, and Dragonrealm definitely.
So I want to jump in.
Just kidding.
I bet. I want to jump into the chat a little bit, and I hope you're not tired of talking about Dragonlance, because there's a lot of Dragonlance fans out there.
I know, and believe me, I'm one of the big ones.
So, Fantasy Ground College, what is your feelings or insights on the possibility of getting a Dragonlance movie?
Oh wow, that both cheers me and frightens me. I would really love to see it if it's done right, but I really don't want to see it if it's done wrong. And we've seen some odd movies come out that would had potential to be really great. And I'm hoping they'll do something. I just hope the right person does it.
So for Rex Draconis, the campaign site, you guys are thinking 5e and Pathfinder?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
So that was one of the questions in the chat I wanted to definitely address. And this is like a ways off. You guys are kind of building this together, which is kind of unique in a sense too, to be, doing the novels at the same time as the RPG and kind of like growing it out. Have you guys had to come up with like a system or format to facilitate that?
I think,
sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, Phil. Look, we just have great communication avenues. Richard's made himself very available to us, which has been fantastic, because as game designers, we're always thinking and trying to put the pieces together and so forth. And Richard's so prolific that every time we have a question, he has an answer. And then these conversations just sort of grow and the ideas come from them, and we find ourselves basically with no end of root material with which to work from. So every day, literally every day, there's some sort of discourse between the 3 of us.
Well, even sometimes if there isn't any root material there yet, it triggers something in Richard, which usually it takes about 6 hours, and I think we've got a journal entry full of useful information that we can use going forward. So it's very much an open canvas for some things, which is great, and we can really bounce things off Richard, and he can throw things at us, and we'll catch as much as we can.
Well, these guys are great with the questions, because obviously this is a world that is developing. But I mean, I did the groundwork for it so we can come up with the stories and the games. We have a wonderful map ready from Patrick Pullen. He did a great job on the map, and left updated eventually because there's some other things you need to put in there. But just every time these guys come up with a question here, it ends up developing something else. It's not just I answer the question and that's it. They answer the question and I'll answer that. And so what about this? They'll say, and I'll say, well, you could do this and this would make sense, and this would make sense, and this what these characters would do. And then eventually there's as he said, we end up with a journal entry. I've written I think 13 or 14 of those already, and there's one more that I'm written right now because we're starting to get into some of the god stuff in the world. I've made mention of a couple of the gods. They haven't really shown themselves except as being talked about in the first story. But they're going to be one of those annoying Greek type gods too, where they all think they know what's best. Which, however, if you read the introduction to Draconis, you know that even they have to answer to something, as some of the bad guys discover by the end of Under the Dragon Moon. But like I said, every time we talk, something develops, and then something hits me ahead, and they ask a couple of questions. I mean, the Quillum, for instance, got fleshed out a lot better through these two guys. And then we start talking about some of the gods. The Minotaurs, we've discussed the Minotaurs, and there's always something. For instance, the information I just put about the Sharud caste of Minotaurs, which basically the Minotaur Empire in this world has a group of samurai types. And I'm looking forward to seeing those guys used both in my stories and in any gaming material at some point too. So, like I said, just every conversation breeds some new material.
So definitely a divergence from Dragonlance with the Pantheon then, because Dragonlance was first they went away and then they were kind of hands off, except for like two deities, and one of them just kind of acted crazy and would blow up the party occasionally, or almost blow up the party occasionally. And then the other one was just trying to take over the world through proxy.
Yeah, these are going to be a little more. We're going to have some lesser gods and some major gods in here. There was some times in Dragonlance where we had a lot of intrusions from the gods. And for instance, when I was writing the Minotaur Wars, you had the main god of the Minotaurs was Sarganas, but at the same time, once he kind of disappeared, supposedly, some other gods tried to grab the Minotaurs as their own, and so I had some intrusions there. And then when I did the Ogre Titans afterward, you see that there's some other gods still trying to intrude in there. For instance, I brought in Surian, who hardly ever got any use of. He's like god of fire or something, and you can see he's kind of he's got a very fiery personality. Just not to be punny, but he can go from one emotion to another. And you don't want to get them on the wrong side of that emotion. But I like that, and I like the kind of annoying Greek god sort of routine where they just can't keep out of things because they think they know best. But I guess if you read the introduction to Rex Draconis, if anybody moves a step too far, there's a power that's greater than them, and there's a reason why it's there that'll eventually be explained, but not for a long time. But the title says it all, Rex Draconis. It's rumored to be a big freaking winged thing, bigger than the gods. But there's also something else to it. So.
When you're talking about the gods, it just makes me think of the voiceover intro to the Kevin Sorbo Hercules series from back in the day.
Yeah, there might be a little bit of influence in that one. I used to watch that one. I think there might be a little of influence in that show in terms of the gods. You're right.
Now, Kyle Ellis wants to give you a shout out to Mr. Knack for inspiring me. I have Wolfheart, Day of Dragons, Legend of Huma, Kaz the Minotaur, Night of Blood, and the Minotaur Wars series on my shelf. Thank you. So there's definitely some fans in the chat.
I thank him. I thank all the people who've enjoyed my stories over the years. I love telling stories. Without my readers, I couldn't tell as many stories as I have and hope to still tell. I appreciate it. I really do.
Now, Brian Smith, do you think the aspect of creating characters after character as a G contributes to certain types of writing style or urge to write out a world? So, and I guess because you used to game a lot more when you were younger, was there like a crossover between your creative process and that hobby?
Yeah, there was. Some of the original settings were, of course, more the traditional D&D settings. So I guess you can see the Dragonrealm is a little bit more traditional, at least in terms of the basic setting. You have dragons, magic, wizards and stuff like that. But of course, I can't leave anything alone. So I start testing characters out in the games occasionally, to see how they worked. In fact, Shade was originally tested out in one of the campaigns we had. Call him Proto Shade at that point. And I decided what I didn't like about him, what I did like about him, and so I adjusted things, and that's how you end up in the novels in the Dragonrealm series. So that's the gaming definitely did help. After time, though, it was a choice of gaming or writing, and of the two, I prefer the writing aspect, obviously. So it'd be nice if I could do both, but I need to sleep occasionally.
Kind of thankful for it too.
Yeah, I totally understand when you're creating a lot of content, when you're writing the way you are, it does not leave a lot of time for other things. So, Zareth Gaming, what original content is in your campaign setting, but not in the Dragonlance setting? So I kind of would elaborate on that even more and say, what are the things that are going to be the biggest differences between Rex Draconis and with someone who's used to Dragonlance?
There's no Kender. some people might be happy about it.
There's no Kender, and I'm hoping that the Quillen won't be as frustrating. Obviously there's a lot of it's in there. Like for instance, the Minotaurs and the Knights and stuff, and the wizard. The magic. The different orders of magic are a little bit different in my world. We haven't really touched on it yet, but I've told the guys we've got the druids, we've got the wizards, the sorcerers, and the necromancers. And I've posted the journal entry on magic in the world, and I think these guys have seen it too. And I explain the good parts and bad parts of each of those orders. For instance, there are some real big drawbacks to being a necromancer in the end. But if you're really greedy, it's a good way of going. And if you're a druid, yeah, it's great to have all that nature magic, but you're going to get caught up a little bit too much into it. So there's a lot of stuff that originates from the gaming world, and then basically I try to take a twist to everything. I think that's the best way to put it. You'll see a lot of stuff you recognize from gaming stuff, but I like to add my own personal twist to it. And I don't know if the guys answered or anything else they can think on that. So, anything?
Yeah, look, there are definitely some significantly different elements. I mean, it is worth mentioning that a lot of what we're trying to do with the setting is to recapture some of the nostalgia that comes from the Dragonlance setting. We think that Rex Draconis has some similarities, and there are strengths in that you don't see in a lot of the newer settings. But obviously, you don't want to be producing the same stuff again, and that's not what the setting is about. So there are a lot of differences. I think there is going to be a large conflict aspect to the world, but it's certainly not quite as dragon-centric. There's a lot of new cultures to be explored, and in terms of I guess the melting pot cities and ports and so forth, they're quite different. I think how the human lands and Rich is probably actually better to describe this, but how the human lands and the Minotaurs interact, I think will be fairly unique as well. And even though Minotaurs play a fairly big role in this setting, already we're getting the sense that they are, despite the fact that like Dragonlance, they are quite a deep and honorable culture, that there are some significant differences there too. The thing about Rex Draconis is it's not bound by a lot of the conventions that were required with TSR in the old days and things like that. Richard's got such freedom to take a lot of those bounded concepts into directions that he was never able to before. And I think you'll see a lot of those similarities actually becoming differences. You know, the Minotaurs won't be the same Minotaurs. The dragons won't be the same dragons. The knights won't be the same knights, even though, you know, they'll be reminiscent. They'll give you a good feeling of, I remember when, but they'll have their own distinctive hierarchy and setup and actions and so forth. So, you know, I think as much as there is similarities, there's going to be a lot of differences too.
Yeah. Look, one of those, especially with the Minotaurs, is the in Dragonlance, for a majority of the timeline, Minotaurs were a slave race. That is not the case in Rex Draconis. They are an established empire with peace treaties with the human kingdoms. So they're not the same Minotaur, I guess, as Dragonlance had, but they do have some of the same ideals. And there's a lot of other differences as well. But it is a developing story.
Well, yeah, it's much of a development story. We'll be seeing as things go on. We'll be seeing much more changes. You know, there will always be stuff that is what you think about in terms of this kind of world. But and one thing I like is that both these gentlemen here, they're very adaptable to the things that I do, which is good. Because I may throw something at them, and they'll, instead of being like, oh, they'll be like, oh, that's neat. You know, and they'll start running off with things themselves from what I've developed. You know, that's one reason why I'm happy to work with them, because I know that they get it. You know, they get what I'm doing. I'm not afraid to hear suggestions from them that I'd be happy to incorporate, into the situation. If they have a question about something that they wonder if it can work, we'll discuss it, and most of the time it'll work. You know, I don't want just two people just obediently trying to copy what I've written in the story into a gaming session. You know, I want them to be able to develop their storylines, based off and go off on some different tangents. Obviously we discussed whether it's okay to go this way or that way based on what I'm hoping to do, but they can introduce you to parts of the world that I may never see for a long time with my stories. And that's what I want. I want it to be a really in-depth world. I want it to feel as real as obviously these sort of things can be. Obviously.
Nice. I want to bring up too one thing, because we were talking about this beforehand a little bit, and that is the idea when you guys bring this to market, it's going to go through Kickstarter, and it's going to be a series of adventures based on the content that's out there already, and then eventually a campaign setting. Is the plan?
Correct. That's right. Yeah.
So just so you guys know what to be looking for. Behind the Screen has a question. What are you all most excited about with the new setting? So for each of you, is there one particular thing that you're like, yeah, I can't wait to dig into this part?
I love the Quillum. Love the Quillum. But for me, it's what we're doing that's different to how Dragonlance did do it back in the day. Whereas the original DL adventures were pretty much, at least for the first few, a direct railroad basically on what the novels were at the time for the Chronicles. We are not doing that. That's one thing we put up or down about and made a decision early. We are not writing adventures that are just going to be regurgitation of the novella and Richard's stories. We're trying to contribute to the world around it, and sometimes they may intertwine, interlink, and cross paths. But we're writing adventures that are going to be adding to the setting. For instance, the first adventure is going to be set just a little bit before Under the Dragon Moon kicks off. So really, it's likely it's going to lead, it's likely it's going to lead into Richard's first novella.
Yeah, look, for me, I think the thing I'm most excited about is a dynamic world, a world with changes and consequences that the players can actually influence the world. I mean, a lot of the settings, published settings these days, as you would expect, are very static. They're, here's your playground, play in it, but, nothing much changes week in, week out. Your actions don't really have any significant impact on the world. The sun rises, sun sets, the world moves on, and you have your fun, but it doesn't affect anyone else. What we're looking for as part of this process, and in conjunction with the fact that Richard is writing these as we go. So we're basically developing these both the novels and the setting in parallel. Is that we're really excited about this idea that when the players play in the setting, their actions will have consequences. They'll be able to influence how the world events take place. And and at the end of the day, when the dust settles and their campaign finishes, they've put their stamp on the world. And that's really what we're looking to do with this. And that's what's most exciting for me.
Yeah, we definitely want them to feel like they're a part of this world, not that you're just stepping into the world for a few moments. That they definitely want to be part of it. And I think that both Phil and Mike have explained it pretty good. Phil and Mike are contributors to this world. They're not just making gaming material for it. I can already see that they love parts of this world as much as I do, and that's something I went looking for that enthusiasm too, and that's why I think that we'll hopefully do really well with this because they will give their experience and love of the game material, what I'm trying to do with the stories, and then meshing the two between each other to make it, like I said, a much more full, vibrant story world overall for everyone to come into and hopefully enjoy sticking around. The people will read the stories to see what's going on and see how that reflects in the adventures, and how the adventures themselves will reflect into the next with the storylines. I've done a little bit of that with some of the worlds I've played in, but because we're a nice little group here right now who understand what each other wants to do, I think that that's going to help us flesh it out in some ways better and easier than some of these these massive worlds sometimes become. We want to make the world cohesive and consistent, and so that people will be able to appreciate it. And I think that's going to happen with us three.
Well, you kind of brought it up, like when you have a lot of people in a roundabout way, when you have a lot of people working on a project, like when you got your hands on humans, like there was inconsistencies that you kind of had to like smooth out, so with being a smaller team, you're not going to have that effect.
No. And you're never going to not make mistakes. Where there's something's going to slip through somewhere along the way. You're going to contradict yourself somewhere along the way. I know that's going to happen, but we're trying to stick. We'll be hoping to be consistent between us and discuss things and flesh things out as seems natural to the setting. So I think I jumped on Phil's answer. Did you want to say something, Phil?
No.
Okay. So, Comic Book University has a question. Mr. Knaak, when you wrote for Warcraft, like the Sunwell trilogy, how much research did you have to do? What goes into writing in these pre-established worlds for you?
With Warcraft, there was a lot of material. I did a lot of researching through. There was already, because the game had grown so large from its beginnings, there was of course already some contradictions and some material that was out of date. And they have a whole group of people, the lore people, who basically their job is to glean through everything, try to make sure everything can be as consistent as possible. But if you look at the original Warcraft material with the gargantuan thing that it is now, you can see how they didn't expect it to be able to get to sprout the world so huge. And so some of the things in the older stuff like I said, it was out of date. They had to change it and update it, which of course I know that bothers, some people like to be consistent from the beginning, and I appreciate that myself. But we always tried to go through everything. If we had something that had to be changed, we tried to figure out how most consistently it could still be to the old material, but sometimes it just wasn't possible. So you try to do whatever you can with all of the information they give you, and with them, and they read everything along through the whole system, and asked me to change things to this and that. Sometimes they would change things I didn't expect them to want to change. So. So it was a very busy process. It taught me a lot. I explained a few things to them in the process too. But overall, we were very happy with what came out. You're never going to please everybody, but it seemed to please a lot of people. We wish everything could have remained consistent from the first material that they had. And I had this with Dragonlance too, obviously. As these worlds grow, especially if you have a company involved behind it, where they're also doing some different things with it. You're gonna have some things that get in conflict with the older material. You try to do what you can to make things smooth, and then you hope that people understand what you had to do. And that's something I learned a lot by working in those worlds. And actually, that helped me a lot with what I'm trying to do with Micah and Phil right now too. So that because there's us three only right now, that and we're on the ground floor of these story ideas, that we can hopefully corral them as best we can.
Well, and I imagine working in the world of Diablo, the world of Warcraft, and Dragonlance, that gave you a lot of experience with wrangling that different information and things you liked or probably didn't like. So going forward, it probably informed a lot of those decisions. So with all these projects that you're working on now, does that mean you're kind of done playing in other sandboxes for a while?
No.
Or it just depends what comes up?
Not necessarily. I'm discussing with people on things. It's like I said, I will adjust schedules as I see need to. As I said, I've got at least one shared world novel coming out this year, although it's not what you might think it is. But no, I'm still talking to people about different worlds. I've contributed some novellas to some other up and coming settings. I mentioned Dark World at one point, which, like I said, Phil has also worked with. They got some interesting stuff there. I contributed a story to a couple other worlds that they're still developing too. So no, I don't mind. I will always be playing in other people's worlds, and like I said, I will just adjust my time. I live to write, basically. That's what I do. The more stories, the better.
Are there any other worlds that people have created that you would really like to work in that you haven't gotten a chance to yet?
Yeah, there's are, but I don't think I'll mention them right now. You may see me in one or two, but no, I would. There's always worlds coming up, new ones and established ones that I just like playing in other people's worlds. When I first started reading stories, the first thing I thought of was putting things into those worlds. Roger Zelazny's Amber Chronicles, for instance, was an early influence, and then Andre Norton with her Witch World stuff. There's always things I would see in those worlds that I would like to toy around with. Even single novels at times from it. So I always just like I enjoy my worlds, but I also enjoy other people's worlds, and I think that gives me the best of both worlds, so to speak.
Who would you say has inspired you the most or influenced your writing the most?
Oh Lord, there's actually a bit of a list on there. As I mentioned, Roger Zelazny. I have to say Edgar Rice Burroughs, especially his Mars series, John Carter of Mars. Read the books. The movie was okay. Read the books. Andre Norton. Read some of her stuff very early on. There's one book called Storm Over Warlock. It's actually science fiction, which I really see as a lot of it's how they wrote. The way their style of writing also was a big influence. There's Edgar Allan Poe. I have to say, especially the poem "The Raven." You may notice a few dark birds and stuff in my stories. There's the list. The list will go on, but like I said, Andre Norton, Roger Lasny, Edgar Allan Poe, Edgar Rice Burroughs. That's 4 good ones right there. I got to meet 2 of those, Andre Norton and Roger Lasny. I'm not immortal, so I wasn't around for Edgar Rice Burroughs or the other or Edgar Allan Poe. So.
Oh, you don't need to be immortal. You just need a time machine.
That one hasn't worked out yet. It keeps sending me back to today. I don't understand that.
Ah, son of a. Well, that's awesome. At what point in your life did you decide you were going to be a writer? Did you know from an early age you wanted to create things? Or did something, did an event come up to make you, this is what?
From the first time I started reading stories, especially fantasy-ish sort of stories, I always wanted to create my own stories. Either stories or either novel stories or comic books. Some sort of medium. I only draw bad stick figures, so comics were definitely out, for in terms of the illustrated part. But I just right away I always wanted to create my own story, so I knew eventually I would do something like that.
Nice. You do have some comic book writing credits to your name too, as well, don't you?
I have done manga. I did some adaptations of actual stuff for Tokyo Pop that was like Ragnarok, which was popular but never finished for someone, annoyingly enough. And then I wrote original material based on the Warcraft stuff too for them. And I've done I've done a couple of one shots here and there on comic stuff. I wouldn't mind getting back, but I actually was asked a long time ago if I would write ElfQuest, the comic, and for I think it was for DC. And at the time I couldn't because of my schedule, and I always wanted to get back to that one because that was kind of a fun series too. But I wouldn't mind getting it back into some comic stuff too. I love illustrated material.
So are you kind of like a strictly fantasy guy, or you dabble in any science fiction at all?
I enjoy science fiction. I mean, I read a lot of Arthur C. Clarke, and I like Robert Sawyer's stuff. But I enjoy fantasy more. Obviously, sometimes I like urban fantasy too, and I have a couple of ideas that will probably be sitting in my head forever at this point for some kind of some science fiction-ish stories. But mostly I do like the fantasy series because I always like to think of unusual things, and I seem to be able to put those in more. Hal Clement had was an old time science fiction author, very science fiction author, and he used to come up with some intriguing sort of characters to me, even though it was very much a science novel. I mean, he would have a novel that where basically you had to the whole just the thing was how humans and these other alien race had to deal with the great pressures of this one planet, or how this one creature would come to. This book was called The Ice, basically the Ice Planet. And we're the Ice Planet because this alien came from such a warm world. Our world would freeze him to death, and that's things like that. So even in my science fiction novels I was reading, I was trying to find the ones with the most intriguing sort of premises to me. So.
There's calls for space dragons in the chat.
I think Anne McCaffrey's done that already pretty good. So.
There can never be too much of a good thing. But we're right up on the hour mark, and I want to thank all you guys for coming and hanging out. And
thanks for having us.
Yeah. Please keep us up to date on where things are going, especially for the RPG. That's the kind of like our bread and butter of our community. So they always want to know what's going on there. And, I'm really interested in checking out some of the new stuff that I just wasn't aware of. Like I said, I've read a ton of your stuff, and I really appreciate you as an author. And you influenced so many of my D&D games and my fantasy worlds.
I appreciate it. I hope people mostly having our stuff listed on Facebook pages, the Rex Draconis Facebook page. If you go to my pro page on Facebook, which is Richard Allen Knaak on Facebook, you can usually find links to stuff on the RPG page or for the Rex Draconis fiction page. Like I said, a lot of our stuff is Facebook oriented, at least right now. So,
Well,
you'll find links to all kinds of other stuff from there.
as always, we have a lot of those links in the description, so you guys, for your convenience, so you can find it, and you know, follow these guys, you know, through building the campaign setting and through the writing that's coming out from Richard. You know, he's a great writer, awesome authors. So I'm really excited about that. I was also excited because I just recently got more so into the urban fantasy stuff. So I'm glad to see you diving into that realm too. I definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, there's 2 novels and Grimdark Magazine has a novelette from that series, which got recommended on the Tangents Online reading list. So I was happy about that. So. And please check out Phil and Micah's other work too, because there's, you know, if you enjoy adventures, you're going to find some good stuff there too. So I can't. That's the reason why I went with these guys.
Yeah, those guys are also. I have your Twitter links in the description as well, so you guys, so they can find Micah and Phil as well. So check them out, please. And with that, guys, until next time, stay nerdy.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.